Haiti bleeds again. Tragedy hits the land of Toussaint and Dessalines. A president is assassinated in the middle of the night. What next for Haiti? That's our show today. Don't go anywhere. Carib Nation is up next. Welcome to Carib Nation. I'm David Hines. Our program today focuses on Haiti. You may ask, Haiti again? Again? Well, on the morning of July 8th, the world woke up to the news that the president of Haiti was assassinated apparently by mercenaries who went into his official residence and murdered him in the presence of his wife and children. We ask again, is Haiti bleeding? Well, yes. Today on Carib Nation, we want to explore what happened. Who were the players, the possible players? What were the circumstances that led to the assassination of the president? And as I said in the opening, we ask, what next? Let me navigate all of that. Professor Franklin Knight, professor of history, as I remember it, at Johns Hopkins University. I think he's retired now. Welcome, Professor Knight. Serge Belgarde, who is a translator, or used to be a translator, the OAS.
I retired from the OAS.
Retired from the OAS. Serge is an Haitian national, so we have an in-house perspective here. Welcome, Serge.
Thank you.
And Ambassador Curtis Ward, the former Ambassador of Jamaica to the United Nations, no stranger to Carib Nation. In fact, he's even more of a regular in Carib Nations than I am. He has his logo behind him. Ambassador, welcome to Carib Nation again.
Thank you very much, David.
Professor Knight, let me start with you, because I think the historical background is important. Often we take it for granted that people know. People know the history. People know the historical circumstances. Link Haiti's present to Haiti's past for us. I know that's a broad question, but I think you were able to do that. Your own book on the Caribbean really touches on Haiti in some parts of the book. Link for us what's happening in Haiti in the present to Haiti's past.
David, I think that's a really good place to start, because if there is one observation we could begin with before we go into the present day of Haiti, is that there is not a general realization, or should I say, it is not emphasized enough in our general consciousness, the importance of Haiti in the history of the modern world. Had Haiti not been a republic of Black people, it would be the second line in every history of the Americas after the Declaration of Independence. Because if you look at the history of Haiti is germane not only to the security of the United States. After all, had the Haitian Revolution not occurred, the United States would still be an Atlantic power, not a continental power. France might have been the most important country in Europe, not today a fifth-rate power. I don't know where you put it in the European community. And what Haiti tried to pioneer, which is to say a truly democratic society where everybody is equal before the law and treated as equals irrespective of birthplace, of color, of condition, or even of gender. We would have accepted that more. If you look at Haiti, when it declared its independence in 1804, you read that constitution, it has all the ideals of the formation of the United Nations of 1947. And we're talking about a constitution written by Black people in 1804, actually 1802, but it doesn't really matter. So why aren't we in the Caribbean more aware of the importance of Haiti? Why aren't we in the Atlantic community more important when we deal with Haiti and Haiti's trials? Because we tend to forget the history of Haiti because we just look at Haiti today. But it's important to remember that until the Civil War destroyed the economy, the US Civil War destroyed the economy of Haiti, Haiti had a higher per capita income than the United States. And that in 1780, Haiti was the richest country, richest colony in the history of the world. We need to know these things. We need to know the role of Haiti, and we also need to know that we owe Haiti as the second independent republic in the Western Hemisphere, as the republic that saved Simón Bolívar and made possible the independence of Spanish America, that we ought to, as a community, be able to help Haiti and be even more involved in Haiti's society and politics today.
Sergey Belgarde, let me come to you as a Haitian living in the diaspora. Tell us something about Haiti that the rest of us are not aware of. Because as Professor Knight correctly says, we have treated Haiti as those of us in the rest of the Caribbean and the rest of the African diaspora. And what comes with that is a kind of ignorance about Haiti. And even when there is not ignorance, there is a kind of blasé attitude. Well, it's Haiti. Tell us something about the essence of Haiti that the rest of us should know.
As a sequel to what Dr. Knight just did, what people do not know or do not learn in history books, because after independence, the foreign powers did their best to isolate Haiti so that the revolution would not, quote unquote, contaminate the other colonial powers. But what people don't realize is that the impact of Haiti on Simón Bolívar and the liberation of Spanish America did not stop only at the Western Hemisphere, because Haiti also helped countries like Greece, Israel, to gain their independence. Greece, for example, was when the Greek patriots were working toward independence, they were fighting for independence. The patriots who were in France, they went to the Haitian leader to ask for help. At the time, the Haitian leader was not in the position to actually send troops, but at the time Haiti was producing a lot of coffee, so they sent all kind of support, the coffee, and asked them to sell this and get the money to help the Greek patriots to fight to gain independence. In the case of Israel at the United Nations, Haiti cast the vote for Israel to become independent. And fast forward to South Africa, it was the Haitian diplomat, Dantes Bellegarde, who was the first one to denounce apartheid at the United Nations. So the role of Haiti as a catalyst was quite significant, and people don't know about that. And of course, the United States when the Battle of Savannah, the fighter of Saint-Domingue, as Haiti was known, also contributed, actually fought alongside the Americans for the Battle of Savannah. And there is a beautiful monument that has been built in Savannah, honoring those fighters from Saint-Domingue. And when in the 1806, a lot of the Haitians moved to New Orleans, the impact of those Haitians was quite significant. For example, it was a Haitian who first started the fight for civil rights in Louisiana. And even in the music, the jazz music, they contributed a lot to the development of jazz, the American jazz. So there is a lot that people don't know about. And of course, the Occidental press has done such a job in presenting Haiti as the poorest country in the hemisphere, the bad press, etc. But I, a Haitian, as I say, we may. I do not think that Haiti is actually poor. Mismanaged, yes, but poor, no. And maybe later I might have the opportunity to develop a little bit more what I mean by that.
And certainly you would. And thanks for that account there, situating Haiti as a supporter of liberation across the world. Certainly the Greek connection is something I did not know. So I think I was right in asking you to tell us something about the essence of Haiti that you do not. Ambassador Ward, you were an ambassador of Jamaica to the United Nations. In effect, you are a Caricom man. And David Rudder, in that famous calypso, Haiti, says, Haiti, we're sorry, we misunderstood you. One day we'll turn our head and look inside you. One day we'll turn our heads and restore your glory. Has the English-speaking Caribbean done right by Haiti? Rudder is singing that calypso in 1986. It's now, 35 years since then. Have we fulfilled our promise to help to restore the glory of Haiti? We in the English-speaking Caribbean, as Professor Nelson Ford would say, the old West Indies.
Well, that is a very, very complex question because there are a number of issues involved with regard to Haiti-CARICOM relationship. For one thing, there have been attempts, particularly during the Preval regime in Haiti, for CARICOM to see many avenues to assist Haiti to build its democratic institutions and rule of law institutions. And there was a resistance coming from Haiti. And there's more that will come out on this as people start examining the role of CARICOM and Haiti. But to give a short answer to the question that you asked, David, I am one of those people who believe that CARICOM should be more proactive in terms of trying to work with Haiti and not to appear as if they are trying to assist, but to partner with Haiti to build on Haitian indigenous institutions. But these kinds of partnership takes two to tango, as we would say. Mm-hmm. And there has been a lot of frustration, even within CARICOM itself, that Haiti, rather than look to CARICOM, looked to North America, mm-hmm. and has really not immersed itself in the CARICOM structure, as many of the former integration leaders in CARICOM would have preferred. I know when you speak with people like P.J. Patterson, who has played a major role in terms of trying to integrate Haiti into Caricom, is not happy with the final outcome. And PJ will tell you that there are issues on both sides, but the cooperation from Haiti has not been forthcoming. And I'm not trying to ascribe blame on anyone when I say this, but I've been privy to some information which will come out at a later date.
Professor Knight, I come back to you. Your brother, historian Walter Rodney, wrote that famous book called Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And I think one can safely say that the West has underdeveloped Haiti. I want you to put on your historian hat again and trace for us that journey from development, the richest sugar colony in the world, to what they now call the poorest country economically in the Western Hemisphere. Trace for us that journey.
Yeah, you know, I do, it's a good consideration, David. I must acknowledge this. I do like what I've heard, you know, especially from Surgeon Ambassador Ward. But I think we have to go back and look at the historical transition of Haiti. You know, we tend to take the present and look back in the past, but sometimes we should start where it began. So let's go back to Haiti as a French colony. This small French colony, because Haiti's only 10,000 square miles, it's not a great geographical space, produced enough sugar and coffee to transform the tastes of the European market. Without Haitian sugar, neither tea nor coffee nor cocoa would become popular beverages. It is by dumping cheap Haitian sugar into that we've begun the start of the wealth of, say, Jamaica and Barbados and all the other 18th century countries that went into sugar. So when Haiti went off exporting sugar at about 1840, sugar took off in Cuba, in Guyana, in Trinidad, in South Africa, in Australia, because the sugar market was there and absolutely necessary to maintain the public commodity distribution of coffee, tea, and cocoa. That's a very important thing. Haiti still continued to produce a large amount of coffee. And what is significant about the Haitian coffee market in the 19th century is that it became quintessentially a small farmer crop. Haiti went from producing and exporting just about 3 commodities in 1780 to more than 12 in 1840. It was the first country to successfully develop a peasant production society, destroyed the plantation agriculture, and peasants were doing very well. But a peasant economy has 2 handicaps, and in the 19th century, 3. One is, to be successful, it needs good central administration, because peasant production doesn't produce consistently enough surplus to be sort of stolen by the government to do all the other things necessary to maintain a society. The second is that peasant production is dependent upon weather. And everybody who does farming knows that in the Caribbean, the weather is not only unpredictable, but there are disastrous hurricanes every few years. Haiti suffered from that. The third is in that the 19th century, while Haitians were successfully transferring wealth, which used to go to France, to themselves, there was no local or international banking system to really control that wealth so that wealth could be created longitudinally across generations. The banking system is a 19th century development, and Haiti suffered from that. And third, what really crippled Haiti, and it never was able to recover from that, was that for between about 1806 and 1860, 80% of Haitian products went to the United States. For 4 years, the market was cut off. So just like Cuba, when the Soviet Union fell, Haiti went through having nowhere to sell its products and no income. Yet, Haiti still maintained to pay its indemnity all the way from 1825 through 1890. But unfortunately, no money in the 1860s, a series of hurricanes in the 1870s, and the failure of the coffee crop in the 1890s meant that Haiti went back to square one. And it has never recovered from that. 20 years of real economic disaster, successive disasters. And so it came into the 20th century indebted to New York bankers because it still had to pay the indemnity, it had to borrow money to pay the indemnity. It sacrificed the very small, and in fact, Haiti has never spent, peasant societies don't usually do, on infrastructure. So the forests were cut down for energy sources, never replanted. Roads were not maintained or built. So after each hurricane, there were less roads and less internal transportation. And production of coconuts and coffee and everything after every hurricane just went down. So you can look at this as external forces acting in Haiti. And Haitians tried their best, but it was difficult. In fact, they were swimming against the tide. They were never helped by the American occupation as, say, the Dominican Republic next door was. What the US tried to do was to restore sugar as an export and rum making as a major enterprise, which is not those two are not peasant occupations. FDR might have liked and pushed Barbancourt and took it to the White House, but it didn't help a lot of Haitians.
Sergey, let me bring you in here, and I'll take you up on your declaration, your postulation that Haiti is not poor. I expand on that because I think that would be a good sequel to Professor Knight's historical overview there.
Here's why I say that. One major problem that we have in today's Haiti, and a lot of those problems started really with the Jovenel dictatorship. There is corruption everywhere. The best way to what would I say, to deal with corruption is not necessarily to eliminate it. That's not realistic. But you need to control it. You control it through institutions that work. Now, unfortunately, and as a Haitian, I have enough information, I can say that corruption has become an effective impediment to the development of Haiti. And the corruption is not only inside Haiti, it's also aided and abetted often by foreign actors. Because the issue of foreign interference in Haiti has been there since 1804 up to today as I'm speaking to you now. Okay? Now, there have been so many, there has been so much money embezzlement in Haiti that you cannot call a country poor when you have so many people stealing for so long and becoming millionaires and doing all kind of things. It's just that we have a problem in Haiti where without being an expert on the matter, I would say if you were to control corruption in Haiti, let's say by 40–50%, we would not need any help from any foreign countries. We would not be subjected to so much pressure. Okay? For example, when you think that the Haitian diaspora sends more money to Haiti than the national debt, just the Haitians and Haitian Americans, Haitian French, you name it, the Haitian abroad remains attached to his land, and they send that much money. And you look at the figures from the Inter-American Development Bank, and you'll see that it's up to $3.1 billion going to Haiti. Okay. Now, this is why I say Haiti is mismanaged. And a lot of people, both Haitians and foreigners, have made a lot of money on the back of Haiti. And one strategy that has been from some foreign companies is precisely to maintain this atmosphere so that they can make a lot of money. And the rice issue, the rice, for example, is an issue. We used to produce all the rice that we need for both for national consumption and maybe not enough for export. But Haiti is I believe the third most important market for American
Uncle Ben.
companies selling rice. So that gives you an idea. And of course, the Dominican Republic considers Haiti its most important market. So we do not produce enough. We have the corruption, you have the foreign interference. So in that sense, that's why I say that Haiti is not a poor country. We have enough to do what we need to do.
And certainly I can attest to that. I visited Haiti about 4 times, and I'm always amazed at the kind of industriousness, the kind of the tenacity of the Haitian people. And I come away from Haiti every time saying, these people are not poor. They're about the richest people in the Caribbean. Ambassador Ward, let me come to you, because both Professor Knight and Sir J. Bellegarde mentioned Duvalier. And I would posit that modern Haitian history, starting from, let's say, the 1957, when Papa Doc came to office to the present, is what, 64 years or so, would be a time when Baby Doc left office. Everything before then, going back to 1957, and everything after then coming, frame for us what happened, because you mentioned Proval. What happened once the dynasty of the Duvaliers came to an end when Baby Doc was ousted in the 1980s?
Well,
frame for us that period.
You know, David, there were also class issues in Haiti. And there was one class that did very well in Haiti, and the class to which the masses belong did not. But I also would like to say a little bit about what Serge was just talking about in terms of the corruption, because that corruption was driven basically by the controlling class in Haiti. The class that did well, they were perhaps the most corrupt. But there is another little issue that plagues a lot of developing countries, and Haiti is no exception, that because of loose controls in the ports, a large amount of the income to the country's treasury is lost in the ports due to corruption. It is estimated that up to about 40% of the revenue is lost in the ports. Because remember, countries like Haiti don't have a large PAYE revenue stream.
Yeah.
And a lot of business people get away with not paying their taxes. So a lot depends on the duties at the port. And if you are losing 40% of those duties to corruption, you are already operating as a deficit. But Serge is correct. And no matter what political leadership we've seen since the Duvaliers, the corruption has not abated, primarily because the institutional underpinnings to deal with corruption are very weak. And this is one of the areas in which Caricom could have been helpful in terms of building those institutions. That is not to suggest that the institutions that exist within Caricom countries at large eliminate corruption, but at least it can identify it and deal with it on a rational basis. And the justice system have been known to function against corrupt leaders when they are exposed and caught. So corruption is a major issue, and the political directorates that have controlled Haiti, there's hardly any time when you will hear from a Haitian or Haitians will be united behind any particular leader, either because that leader represents the bourgeoisie or represent the proletariat. We go back to Aristide. Aristide came in with a whole lot of hope for the masses of Haiti. But Aristide was not allowed to govern for the masses of Haiti. And on and on and on. So it is a whole question of institutions that are strong enough to go up against those that bring corruption and bad governance to Haiti. But Haiti essentially is not a poor country. And as a matter of fact, Haitian products continue to be first-class products, except that you don't see much of them anywhere anymore.
Yes. Professor Knight, we started the program by making reference to the assassination of the president of Haiti. But as a historian and as a political and social analyst, we know that often things are really the occasion. The incident tells us about something bigger is happening in the society. And I want you to give our audience a sense of the subtext. What are the conditions in Haiti at present that would facilitate that kind of operation in which a president was ambushed in the night of Bob Marley and murdered?
Well, David, we must begin by saying that this situation in Haiti is not peculiar to Haiti. Right. That you take any small country and a lot of large countries, and the governments and justice systems have in fact been undermined by narcotics, international narcotics trading. And I can go, from Mexico all the way down to Chile. There are a lot of things I don't quite understand about the assassination of the president. And that is, the president has not only his presidential security guard, but he also has the Haitian National Police. And you could not, in my estimation, bring 30 outsiders to the country, and they were known. Now they've arrested them, and we have all sorts of information in them. And a lot of Colombians, suspicious Colombians, are in there at high prices. So it just seems to me, and the point I was making is that there is no fighting. These people come in, go to the president's private residence, there is no resistance, and they assassinate the president and just sort of walk away. People who apparently are well paid from outside or from wherever. And so it seems to me that there is an inside-outside job working cooperation here. If it were totally inside, I think there would be some plan for succession. I am astonished that no group came out to claim responsibility for the assassination, and no group came, including the Haitian National Guard or the Haitian military or the Presidential Guard, to say they're in charge. This is astonishing to me in a situation like this, because you never have such a political vacuum anywhere. And so I think we learn a lot as it comes out. I'm looking at Colombia closely. I'm wondering why these Colombian ex-military were there and who paid them $5,000 a month. But it also, has astonished me because, as I'm sure Serge will confirm, Haiti pays like 20,000 US dollars per month for public relations in Washington. And I keep saying, why is Haiti having a lobbyist in Washington paying them that much money when that can be invested in health in Haiti? I mean, as far as I hear, there is no vaccination program. There is no testing program. We know the health service is poor. The Cubans have been supplying almost 100% of it for a long time. And this is an area, I think, below the political, that Caricom could be really useful. Health services, training Haitians, bringing them out of Haiti and sending them back. The Cubans do that a little bit, but can't get them to stay there. Training, linking in with the education system, so that at least for the non-elite, you have a slightly more sophisticated public than you do in Haiti, where they still have too much confidences in the promises of people who speak well. And I've known a lot of Haitians, and I've talked to them about this. They speak well, but carrying those promises to reality is not something that I found a part of their political rhetoric.
Dr. Franklin Knight there. Weighing in case you're just joining us, we are talking about Haiti tonight on Carib Nation. We are talking about Haiti against the backdrop of the assassination of the president, and we are trying to put what happened there in context, because often context tells us a lot than the incident itself, and that is why I am going to ask Serge, who would want to assassinate the president of Haiti?
Yeah, well, this is, as I said, it's a complicated issue, but I'm going to try to, I don't pretend to have the answer, the specific answer, but speaking of context, I think I need to set the context. By the way, speaking of what Dr. Ambassador Ward said about how Caricom could help, yes, Caricom could help, but the thing is, the Ambassador Ward mentioned that there hasn't been much cooperation on the part of Haiti, and particularly in Jovenel Moise, that was very, very true. And even myself, I used to speak to some friend, and I was so vexed that the way Jovenel Moise was acting toward Caricom, and I felt that Caricom had enough element, because Haiti being a member of Caricom and having signed certain documents, and Caricom could have acted much more forcefully toward Haiti. But that was an apartheid, as they say. About the assassination of Jovenel Moise, people, of course, discovered or learned a lot of things after the assassination. But the last time that the president of Haiti died violently was in 1915. It was Guillaume Sam. So you have at least two generations who are not used to this kind of act, you know. We have had coup d'etat, presidents have gone into exile, etc. But violent assassination like this, no. That's why people were more shocked than emotionally affected, because Jovenel Moise was extremely unpopular. And because of his policies, and that's what people do not know about the background of Jovenel Moise, he has been accused of corruption. In fact, there has been 3 reports from a corruption entity in Haiti that cited him 63 times involved in act of corruption. He had set up a commission on disarmament that very stupidly got into, because you know about the issue of the gangs in Haiti. We've never had that many gangs operating in Haiti. That's unheard of in our history. Now, his commission on disarmament somehow decided, very stupidly, as I was saying, that the gangs, they could federate, unheard of. And now you have this guy who is the head of this federation that he calls G9. You probably heard about the name Barbecue, his name. Now he's the head of G9. He has an active arrest warrant against him. But he's giving speeches, he's marching the street, nothing happening, right? No, that's the issue of the gangs. Now, the way, for example, in some of his speeches, he would say that nobody would get this power from him. So he was actually setting up a dictatorship in Haiti. His term ended on February 7, 2021, but he insisted that his term ended in 2022. And in November 2020, the term of the senators and the deputies ended, and he never organized any election because he wanted to govern by himself. He fired. He led the terms of fired all mayors. In fact, at the time of his death, there were about 11 elected officials for a population of about 11 million people. And those officials were the 10 senators whose term end in 2000 next year, and Jovenel Moise. These were the only 11 elected officials. So that's why he's assassinated. There is a complete vacuum. He violated the Supreme Court by firing 3 judges and replacing them with his people. That is totally illegal. He created an electoral council to work on elections and on a referendum to amend the constitution, which is illegal because the 1987 constitution forbids referendum. So and the electoral council actually is illegal because it was never sworn in. So he created, he chose about 4 or 5 people and asked them to write a new constitution. So he adopted about 65 decrees during that year. Totally illegal. So it was a stream of illegality. So he made a lot of enemies, and he decided to attack those who were in charge of furnishing electricity to the country. Of course, as the Ambassador Ward was saying, members of the bourgeoisie. Granted, they were making millions every month because there are 3 companies providing electricities after some contracts that were signed with the state. I mean, they were having a ball, making a lot of money, and they deserved to be called before the court. But Jovenel Moise attacked them, and not legally, but politically, forcing them to go into exile. And as it turns out, that it was a matter of, as we say in French, au toi que je m'y mette. He wanted to take their place and make more money. So so you understand why he was assassinated. People were shocked, but you didn't see people in the street, crying or anything like this. You see, so that's what this kind of context, people don't know. They just heard the president was assassinated.
Right.
Yes, but myself, I mean, I never thought that it would happen because everybody wanted him to actually to resign and appear in court to answer for his illegality, illegal acts. But this kind of violence, nobody wanted that.
Ambassador Ward, let's switch gears because we are swiftly coming to program time and talk about what next for Haiti. We've asked this question so many times. The Duvaliers came to an end, their rule. We ask what next. Aristide came and they threw him out, and we asked what next. The earthquake came and we asked what next. Here we are again, after another crisis in Haiti. What next? What next for Haiti?
What's next for Haiti is really not being determined in Haiti, and that's the problem. What next for Haiti is being determined by a core group of countries that set themselves up as this core group on Haiti. And as far as I know, there is no Caribbean country in that group. No representative of Caricom. And unless Caricom has a role, and a significant one, in trying to uplift Haiti and to provide the technical assistance that Haiti needs to rebuild its institutions, to bring about the kind of unity that is required in the leadership going forward, at least in the next couple of years, to stabilize the political architecture, to stabilize the country, and to help to rebuild some institutions. Unless Caricom has a major role, we will be repeating this cycle over and over and over again. I'm not suggesting by any means that Caricom is the panacea for Haiti, but I firmly believe that Caricom is an integral requirement part to rebuild Haiti. And in my mind, that's what next. Not the core group operating out of Washington, Paris, or Toronto, or Quebec, or wherever, determining what is best for Haiti. Haiti, the people of Haiti must determine that. But the people of Haiti needs help, and Caricom can provide that help.
Can provide that help. Professor Knight, from your study of history of the Caribbean in particular, of Haiti in particular, of the Western Hemisphere, are you optimistic that Haiti can pull itself out of the rut that is being imposed, as you have explained, by external forces, their natural disasters, internal authoritarian rule? Are you optimistic that before we enter the second half of the 21st century, Haiti could pull itself out of the rut?
I'm optimistic. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy. And I have always said that Haiti cannot do it by itself. But in any strategy for the development of Haiti, I think a way must be found that the assistance to Haiti is possible without being mediated by any Haitian that's in place. I have always said that if Haiti is to be restored and developed, that's to be done the way Costa Rica was. You have to go to the people, and if you can have the people on your side building these types of institutions in education, in public services. But I like what Serge says. It's not that you want to eliminate corruption, it's that you want to work with it, and that it cannot be allowed to be the dominant factor in the society. I mean, there is a scale at which, beyond that point, it is undermining the entire civil society. And what you want to do is just have it in moderate proportions as a form of income distribution, even though not a fair one. But still, I think Caribbean institutions should take a lead in creating the type of all-embracing community association in which Haiti is provided equal a seat at the table and discussed openly what it is that we're going to do. And not like Caricom always does, it has these big wordy plans. Take very simple things and say, in 2 years, this is what we're going to do. Roads, Next 2 years, we're going to do running water. Next 2 years, we're going to do reforestation. And then we will look at things like trade. One of the things I really think that the Caribbean community could do, and I know that the Bahamas did it for a time, is to allow Haitian workers to work in other Caribbean countries. Give them, you know, the type of access that's restrained elsewhere. Haitians will go back and use that income along with the remittances which they get to do wonders in their country.
Interesting suggestion. But Dr. Knight, is you would know in recent times at least 8 Caricom countries have turned back Haiti. My own country, Guyana, was the latest one, and that's information for another program, because I do like your both your points about immersing Haiti in this larger community in a meaningful way, so that Haiti is not isolated, because it's the isolation of Haiti, to my mind, that's one of the biggest facilitators of what happens in that country. Serge, what's the mood of the people in Haiti almost a month after the assassination?
You know, there is a lot of frustration. There is a lot of fear, a lot of impatience. And the frustration comes from the fact that even before the assassination of Jovenel Moise, one thing that the Haitians have always been saying, and that they repeat every time they can, is let Haitians tell you what the situation is, because they live it, they know what the problem is. Ambassador Ward was talking about the core group, and that has been a major problem. Granted, as a Haitian, I can tell you, on the Haitian side, there have been too much internal, there is a Creole word that we use, chirépit, that means too much infighting, right? And this is the argument that the international community has been using to interfere and to impose their own will. But now the people are saying, we want a Haitian solution. We want, this time, there have been so many problems that we want the Haitian solution. That's why they're talking about the Petro-Caribe trial, where $4.2 billion were disappeared, right? But the international community is still resisting that, because the Haitians said that that has to happen. And in terms of the change in government, right now there is a proposal from the civil society along with political parties that have come up with a solid proposal, and they say this is a Haitian solution. How is the international community, the core group, mainly the United States, is still, you know, trying to control? The whole thing is the issue of control. They want to control any kind of transition going on in Haiti. And we, the Haitian people, we say, no, we know what we want. We want to be able to have our own elections. The elections cannot take place right now because the conditions are not met. They will not conduct, they will not favor adequate elections. But as I was saying earlier, the foreign interference is still very strong.
Foreign interference. Ambassador Ward, I'll give you the last word. You have 45 seconds.
Well, I think one of the takeaways from this is that Haiti must control, the people of Haiti must control Haiti's destiny. Mm-hmm. And any outside assistance must be just that, assistance, not interference. Certainly, where the capacity is lacking in Haiti, they should seek partnership within the region to build those capacities and not look to North America or Canada or to Europe for those partnerships. That partnership right there in the Caribbean is what Haiti needs right now.
Right there in the Caribbean, in the spirit of democracy. Professor Knight, 30 seconds for your closing thoughts.
I agree wholeheartedly with Ambassador Ward, and I have thought for a very long time that the outside impact on change in Haiti has been inordinate, and it's time for it to be localized, both within Haiti and within the Caribbean.
Thank you very much, Professor Franklin Knight, Serge Bellegarde, and Ambassador Curtis Ward. We've been discussing the situation in Haiti, and we will do a part 2 of this program, looking at Haiti in its broader context, because I want to repeat Professor Knight's suggestion, and that is to locate Haiti deep within the Caribbean belly, as David Rudder would say, and not as an outsider. And perhaps that would give Haiti and Haitians the kind of space that they need, because after all, they are pioneers. We are free because Haiti freed itself first. Until the next time, this is David Hines thanking you for tuning into yet another edition of Carib Nation. And remember a motto on this program: one people, one culture, one Caribbean, one nation.